So, good evening everyone, and welcome to this event hosted by the Center for Geopolitics. My name is Donatas Kupčiūnas, I'm a research associate at the center. Today we have a very special guest who came to visit us from Vilnius. Rūta Vanagaitė is a Lithuanian theater critic, writer, journalist, and a public intellectual. In 1978, she graduated from the Russian Institute of Theater Arts in Moscow. In the 1980s, she studied theater science in Helsinki University and then worked as a journalist on cultural affairs at the largest Finnish newspaper, Helsingin Sanomat. She returned to Lithuania in the last days of the Soviet Union, and since then, she has directed theaters, organized theater festivals, produced TV shows, advised the Prime Minister of Lithuania, founded a couple of public relations agencies, and directed successful election campaigns. In 1993, she was named the Woman of the Year in Lithuania. Today, however, Rūta is mostly known as a best-selling non-fiction author. Her first book exposed the sad state of elderly care in Lithuania, and her second book, which dealt with the challenges faced by women at the age of 50, was a bestseller for more than 2 years with over 45,000 copies sold in Lithuania. Today's event, however, is about her third book, which in Lithuanian is called Mūsiškiai, or Our People, co-authored with the famous Israeli Nazi hunter and Holocaust historian Dr. Ephraim Zurov. The book deals with the complicity of ordinary Lithuanians in the Holocaust and also uncovers the efforts of all Lithuanian governments since independence to hide or to obfuscate the role played by local Nazi collaborators. The book sold 19,000 copies and deeply affected public discourse on the subject and forced people to ask very uncomfortable questions about their country's past. And this was actually the point when I met Rūta Vanagaitė. It was on Facebook. I saw a woman who was being sort of cyber-bullied and called a traitor by heavyweight politicians, city mayors, the cultural elite, and by some of my friends. I haven't seen anything like that before. Just like Rūta, I do not have Jewish roots. And to be honest, I have not been interested in the subject of Holocaust before. But Rūta's research was so compelling that I quickly got sucked into those virtual keyboard warrior debates. And in the process, I got blocked or unfriended by quite a few people whom I thought I knew quite well. When one of my Lithuanian friends, for instance, said that he despised Vanagaitė, I asked him if he maybe has read her book. And he said no, because she's redacted. but that's not all. That's not all. This storm with Vanagaitė actually culminated in a modern case of book burning. In October 2017, all 6 Vanagaitės books, including the one on the bloody elderly care, were removed from every bookstore in Lithuania after Rūta dared to criticize the leader of Lithuanian anti-Soviet partisans. That served as a pretext, sort of the last drop to finish her off. Well, what has this all to do with geopolitics, you might ask? After all, we're a center for geopolitics, as you may see. Well, it's a case where geopolitical arguments are being used to silence historians. One of the main points of this modern-day inquisition was that by uncovering all these horrible facts, Rūta Vanagaitė was playing into the hands of no one else than Mr. Vladimir Putin himself. The Russians have always portrayed Lithuanians as Nazis, the argument goes. So by writing about Jews, you are committing treason, because the Russians can use this in their propaganda against Lithuania. Ergo, you should shut up and stick to the approved guidelines. Now, unfortunately for some, and fortunately for us here, Rūta is not the person who can be silenced by such nonsense. So far, her books have been translated into English, Polish, Russian, Hebrew, and Rūta has given lectures at Harvard University, University of Tokyo, Menachem Begin Heritage Center in Jerusalem. She also has received a number of prestigious awards, such as the Medal of Valor by the Simon Wiesenthal Center or the Award of European Jewish Congress. So, ladies and gents, it is my greatest pleasure to welcome Rūta Vanagaitė, who is going to tell us how she became interested in all this, what she found out, and how she survived. Rūta.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you for coming. It's my first time in Cambridge. It is such a wonderful city, and it's such a wonderful day. I hate to spoil your mood tonight. But maybe, you know, after our talk today, you just all go and get a drink, okay? And forget me. I promise I'm going to do the same. You know, my background is theater, drama. And I always was creating drama and was doing out of little things, creating drama and seeing, you know, the festival, doing the festivals, doing theater shows, doing whatever, doing elections. Elections is always drama. I could never expect that I will be a figure in a drama, that drama will happen in my own life, and very unexpected and very drastic way. So I am not Jewish, I'm Lithuanian, middle-aged, was never interested in the Holocaust, never, as in Lithuania, most people would never be interested. And actually, I was born 3 years after Stalin died, in Soviet times. I was raised in anti-Soviet family, but still by the Soviet school. So I am typical Homo Sovieticus Lituanus, which I loved my country, and I was very patriotic, but I got a Soviet education. So actually, in my generation and after the war, we didn't meet Jews. I mean, the Jews as Litvaks, those Jews of Lithuanian origin, because almost all of them were murdered. The Jews we met were the Jews who came from Soviet Union after the war. They were Russian-speaking Jews who took places, who spoke Russian among themselves, and it reinforced our prejudices that Jews are Bolsheviks. Jews are communists. That was what Hitler said, and that's what we saw with our own eyes, Russian-speaking Soviet Jews. And actually, when I was at school, we never heard the word Holocaust. We never knew about what happened. What we knew from the forest, because there are so many places where Jews were murdered, they were like peace-loving Soviet citizens killed by Hitlerites. Who thinks that they're Jews, not Jews? Some kind of Soviet citizens, peace-loving Soviet citizens, not us. So it's so interesting that I read that in 1979, most popular word in Europe was Holocaust. And that year, in Soviet Union, we studied Marxism and Leninism, and had 1 or 2 TV stations showing Soviet propaganda, and luckily, some Indian melodramas in the movie theaters. So that was our education. That's why I tell you that I am, and my friends in my generation, are Homo Sovieticus Lituanus. I have 2 children. They are raised in independent Lithuanian schools. And since I was not interested in Holocaust, since I didn't know anything about it, or very vaguely, they also, in the family, we never spoke about it. At school, they had 1 lesson, 45 minutes, about the Holocaust in Lithuania. And mainly it was about the saviors of the Jews. Recently, I asked one of the teachers, teacher who came to me, and he said, you know what, I would like to teach our children about the Holocaust in Lithuania, but it's only 45 minutes at grade 10. And they are so young that, it would be very traumatic for them to tell the truth. We shouldn't traumatize our children. But my children and my children, when we were at school, they knew everything about deportations of Lithuanians. They knew everything about the partisan movement, about our history, because Jews are not our people. So we have our own tragedy, deportations, partisan movement, so they are taught very thoroughly about this. During 12 years at the school, they were taken to, during summer, during May and October, all children are taken to excursions throughout Lithuania. So they have been to all museums possible. We have a museum of devil, we have a museum of a horse, we have a museum of chocolate, we have castles, we have a lot of different museums, Grand Dukes and whatnot. They have never been to a single Holocaust site. So, the simple facts that I didn't know about, just 1 minute, that Lithuania was a center of Jewish religion of culture. Our capital, Vilnius, was called Jerusalem of the North. Over 200,000 Jews were living there before Nazi occupation. There were 200 little shtetls, that's how we call Jewish towns, in the provinces where Jews had their houses, shops, schools, and synagogues. In Vilnius alone was 130 synagogues. And during World War II, over 90% of Lithuanian Jews were murdered. It's the highest percent in Europe. 3/4 of them just in 4 months, August, November 41. We never had gas chambers. Gas chambers were introduced in 42, when almost all Lithuanian Jews were murdered, most of them near their homes. Each of these 200,000 people was shot individually. Some of the children were buried alive. It's very hard to shoot a child if he is small. A difference between Europe, West European countries, and Lithuania, Poland, and Ukraine is that West European Jews were sent elsewhere to be murdered. French people would put them on trains, send to Auschwitz. Germans would send them out. Lithuania, Poland, Ukraine, our local people murdered our neighbors, the Jews. But this is actually Lithuania, Poland, Ukraine were center of Holocaust in Europe. But later Auschwitz took all the attention of the world because it was much more cinematographic than our bushes and our pits. By whom those people were murdered? Up to this day, majority of us Lithuanians are sure it was not us. Jews were murdered by Germans with the help of some Lithuanian degenerates. And why those degenerates, low lives, why agreed to shoot the Jews? Because Germans were standing behind them and pointing at them. If they wouldn't have shot the Jew, they would have been shot themselves. Lithuanian society at large never participated in this crime and, of course, never took any property. Germans must have taken it all. Moreover, it's the largest percent of Lithuanians were saving the Jews. 3,000 Jews were saved. Okay, 200,000 murdered, 3,000 Jews were saved. Very nice. And moreover, we Lithuanians are probably the biggest victims in Europe. Stalin has deported to Siberia 200,000 of us. 200 Jews murdered, 200 Lithuanians deported. Us Lithuanians, them Jews. When I was planning to start writing the book, and one of my friends, she has 2 degrees, 2 university degrees. She said, well, why don't you write about us Lithuanians, about our deportation? 200,000 were deported. And they said, you know what, Vida? Those Jews who were deported by Stalin to Siberia, they survived, they came back. Those who stayed, they were dead. So you see, why don't we change? We Lithuanians would be shot at the pits, and them Jews would be deported. You think it would have been better? She was thinking, she said, no, let's leave it the way it is. There is certain obsession in the post-communist countries with a victimhood, claiming that our country is ultimate victim. In Lithuania, almost every family has had a victim, or many of them. My grandfather was arrested by the Soviets and died in Siberia, in Gulag. His family was deported. My uncle, my aunt's husband, had to run from the Soviets after the war and was hiding many years in America under a female name. So, myself, Homo Sovieticus Lituanus, being a very popular author, 7 years ago, by sheer coincidence, I discovered that Jews were murdered not by a bunch of degenerates. I did a Jewish project, because European Commission was financing it, a nice Jewish project, very nice. And then we have such a presidential commission for investigating Soviet and Nazi crimes. And the leader of that, the executive director of that commission, he called me and said, Rūta, you did something nice, a project about the Jews. Maybe you want to go to Jerusalem or to Israel. I said, yeah, I've never been there. He said, every year Yad Vashem, which is museum in Jerusalem for commemorating of Holocaust, they are coming, making a little seminar for Lithuanian teachers, and then selecting, part of the teachers or biggest part of those teachers to go to Israel for 2 weeks. Wonderful weather, wonderful hotel, wonderful food. I said, why not? Why not? And they came to the seminar because in order that our Lithuanian middle-aged teachers, older than me or my age, to teach a little bit about the Holocaust, they have to be brought, into some class, and Lithuanian historian has to brief them a little bit that, because they wouldn't ask stupid questions, or wouldn't say that our tragedy is the biggest. So I came to this seminar because I'm going to sit for 5 hours, then I'm going to have a nice lunch, and then they might select me to go to that country with nice food and nice hotels. And there was a young historian, who came to the place like this, an audience like in the room like this, and he started telling what really happened in Lithuania in 1941. That was not, there were like 600 Germans in the whole Lithuania. The German front came in and moved back to Russia, and leaving local collaborators and some German administration. In Vilnius city administration, there were 6 Germans. And that there was a huge bureaucratic machine. Like we, Homo Sovieticus Lituanus and Homo Sovieticus and Lituanus and whatnot, we always thought the Holocaust happened at the pits, okay? The pits were dug by someone, we don't care. Then the Jews were brought, shot by these degenerates who were, Germans were pointing at them, and that's it. No. The Jews had to be identified by city administrations. Lists had to be made. They had to be convoyed. Digging of the pits had to be organized. Closing the pits had to be organized, and distribution of the property had to be organized. And then I realized that those 2 heroes, relatives of mine, have been part of this bureaucratic machine, because my grandfather made a list of the Jews in his local village. And this wonderful uncle who ran to America and lived on the female name, he was the chief of the police in August 1941, when 10,000 of Jews were murdered in the city of Panevėžys. And then I thought, okay, but what about, he said, what about the property? Germans took it. No. They were, okay, Germans took valuables, Germans took some money, but they couldn't control everything what was taken from the Jews. But what about the houses? What about the furniture? What about the clothes? What about all this? And then, this 45 minutes that changed my life. After I was shaking, like my whole world was shaken. And then I came after the lecture, I came to this historian and said, can I meet you? Can we talk more about this? Can I find out about my relatives and about the whole business? What books I should read? Where shall I go? We met in the square. He was during this lunch break next day, and he brought me plastic bag with some xerokopia, angliškai? Copy of the book called Lithuania, Crime and Punishment. This was a book published in Israel by the lawyer called Melamed, he's now unfortunately dead, with 5,000 names of Holocaust perpetrators. He said, take this until Monday, read it, and see if you find your relatives. I found my aunt's husband, desk murderer. And then next we met on Monday. Again, we were looking that nobody would see us and nobody would see what he's giving me. And I said, what is this list? What is the situation with this list? He said this list in 2005 was sent to Lithuanian government. And Lithuanian government thought, what the hell we can do? You know, there's a list of 5,000 perpetrators. What shall we do? So they gave it to the Center of Research of the Genocide. Okay, the center historians started, investigating. They worked for a couple of years. They discovered that out of these 5,000 people, 1,000 people certainly were shooting the Jews. But then they found another 1,555. So there was altogether proven 2,055 people were actually murdering the Jews at the pits. We don't talk about desk murders. We don't talk about those who organized. We talk only about actual murderers. What shall they do with this list? Shall they continue? What shall they do? That's historians told me who are doing this job. So they sent it to the government in 2011. They sent it to the Lithuanian government. It disappeared. It vanished. After he told me, I had my contacts, in the government with the vice prime minister who was responsible for Jewish issues. Toks Rimantas Vaitkus. Okay. I thought maybe I can meet him. I want to see him. And he said, can you tell me where is the list? It's some draw. Why don't you do something with that list? 2,055. Give it to general prosecutor. Give it to some. We have to do something. It's like, why not? He said, very interesting thing to me. He said, you know what? If we prove that, if we condemn those 2,055 and we say, okay, they were murderers, Jews will say, where is the rest? There will never enough for the Jews. Never. So it's better not to start. We gave what he said. We gave all because Lithuania had, hundreds of synagogues and all the Torah scrolls, where some of them were survived and they were kept somewhere. So Lithuania decided to give these Torah scrolls to Israel. They said, we hired a plane. We sent those 400 Torah scrolls to Israel. And Jews said, okay, where is the rest? It's better not to start. So here I am with all this information, and this historian, wonderful historian, he brought me to the special archives. He showed me the case files of my father, case files of all these murderers. He brought me to the library. There were wonderful books written by Lithuanian historians. Nobody reads them. There's a huge gap between what Lithuanian historians write about the Holocaust and the public perception, and the government, and the education. So, I spent 9 months in the archives, reading testimonies of the murderer, reading case files. They were arrested after the war and interrogated, and some never get out of prison. So they were simple men. They were not any kind of degenerates. They went to shooting battalions because they thought that's the beginning of Lithuanian national armed forces. In 1941, they thought Germans will give us independence, or some form of independence, and Lithuania needs the army. So that's why they went. Also because they were promised some salary, also because they were promised that they might be given some goods after Jews disappear somehow, but they were not told that they would have to kill. There were 26 self-defense battalions in Lithuania with about 500 to 700 people in each. Lithuanian historians have confirmed that at least 10 of these battalions participated in the Holocaust. These people in the battalions were not forced to shoot. They could leave the battalion if they wanted to. Many left, many stayed. They did not have to shoot if they didn't want to. Some of them refused to shoot and were immediately replaced by other volunteers. There was not a single documented case of anyone in Lithuania who would refuse to shoot a Jew and would be shot himself. You know how these good Christian soldiers in their testimonies called the Jews the condemned. Somebody has condemned them, and I'm a last part of the chain, so what can I do? This word alone freed them from responsibility. What are my choices, they were saying, if God has allowed such atrocities? If my government allowed this, and my officers told me to shoot, and if I wouldn't shoot, the other soldier would shoot anyway. these people didn't choose to be murderers. Most of them were not sadists or any kind of beasts. They just slipped into the crime, and therefore they didn't feel guilty. They externalized the guilt. I saw the interviews of the killers filmed by Washington Museum of the Holocaust. The journalist asked an old man named Juozas, who was murdering Jews in Belarus, because Lithuanians were sent to Belarus to murder people there. How did you shoot the Jews? And he replied, Jews would walk in a line, silent like sheep, together with their children. Then at the pit they would remove out the outer clothes, remaining in the underwear, lay down in the pit with their faces down on the top of Jews already murdered. And if there is the father with a son, the father would lie down and put his arm around the child. Then we would shoot. Whom you would shoot first, father or the son? Asked journalists. And Juozas explained, are we some kind of beasts who would shoot the child in front of his father? Of course we shot the father first. There are many, in this book, Our People, there are many testimonies of, I have to read you just a couple of them. And you'll realize that it's like, those people actually, there is a social portrait of, a study of a social portrait of the Jew shooter. We call them Jew shooters. Half of them were after 2 or 3 primary school classes. So they are half illiterate. So these are statements made by members of the killing battalion before the Supreme Court of Lithuania in 1962. Aleksas Raižys. I do not know why I joined the battalion. I cannot explain what I did. Maybe I joined the battalion because of poverty. I don't know. I don't know why I was shooting people. Juozas Kopūstas. When I joined the battalion, my purpose was to get some goods. We did not get any salary. We were rewarded with the clothes of the victims. It was useful for me to be a member of the battalion. After the first shooting, I did not realize I was doing something wrong. Klemensas Kabickas. I joined the battalion because of my poor health. The job wasn't difficult. I did not know the people I shot. They hadn't done anything to me. I'm religious. When I was shooting, I didn't know what would come out of this. After the shootings, I used to go to confess. And then this property issue. When these historians told me that Lithuanians took so much of Jewish property, I came home and I realized that my grandma was living in Panevėžys in 1941, and when my mother was born. And I have some dishes from her. I have some antique clock. I have some antique bed. And I started thinking, did she buy it? Did she get it 41? And then I looked into the documents about this little city of Panevėžys. Fall in 41 in Panevėžys, where 10,000 Jews were shot, and some things or valuables were taken by Germans, some were by Lithuanian administration, some other things were donated to theater, to orphanages, to schools, to pharmacies, to hospitals. And the rest was sold in the auctions. And still a lot was left. So then the Panevėžys city municipality distributed for free after all was donated, sold, whatever. Distributed for free 2,636 men's pants, 7,644 shirts, 12,751 sheet, 8,235 pillowcases, 10,000 and so on, so on, and so on, and so on. Altogether, 80,000 items. After Jews were murdered in Panevėžys, remained 25,000 people. So each person living in Panevėžys got 4 Jewish things. So the chances are that this watch or those nice cups are from them. And then there was this horrible thing about the golden teeth, because many murderers who participated in the killing of the Jews, after the murders, they would go down into the pits and extract teeth. So when I was thinking that if my grandma or my mother got some golden went to the dentist, to get, the golden teeth, because at Soviet times it was golden, there was no ceramics. So the dental technician would ask, your gold or ours? And only now I started realizing, what does it mean, your gold or ours? These must be, piles of Jewish teeth with people were waiting and then started using them. So the chances are that in my mother's mouth, who is now dead and buried, there is the tooth of a Jewish person murdered. And if you start thinking, then you realize the Holocaust is like a black hole. It's better not to start thinking about it. It's better not to start imagining, because there's no end. And that's why it's so difficult for Lithuanians to accept the facts. Very simple. They are too dark, too horrible. And Germany didn't have a choice. It took France 50 years to admit the guilt, and still the people, French people, were just sent elsewhere. For us, it's too horrible to admit. And why? Psychology gives the answer. Sigmund Freud gives an answer. Human brain has a defense mechanism called repression, pushing out of awareness things that cause anxiety, stress. They are too difficult to swallow. And people do it unconsciously. Apparently, nations do the same. They push out the national trauma. They push out of national awareness. We do not deny Holocaust. We just push it out of our awareness. Did it really happen? So I didn't have any choice to write a book. And luckily, I was such a popular writer that my publisher, biggest in both the Baltic countries, called Alma Litera, were waiting for another book for me to write, another 15 or 20,000 copies or 30,000 copies. Anybody, I mean, it's like a magazine. We republish almost every month. So he said, what are you going to write now? I said, I don't know, about men. I said, okay, great, write about men. And they're putting the book about men into their plans. And now I'm coming to the general manager in summer 2015, after I really did my research. She said, how is the book about men going? I said, not really. Well, you will get this book about men, but a little bit later. Now I'm writing something else. So she asked me, what I'm writing? I said, about the Holocaust. I said, what? You and the Holocaust? I said, do you understand what is geopolitical situation? I said, yes, I know. Putin can occupy Lithuania any moment. Even then, we were thinking he's occupying. The only thing that he is waiting until Vanagaitė will write a book where she will admit the Lithuanians were killing Jews. And then he can, he said, well, okay. So you want to write it? I said, okay, yes, I want. That's you get book about men, but this book first. I said, okay, fine. Don't tell anybody that you are writing it. Never anybody until we publish. And she was right. I didn't tell anybody. And she said, okay, so we're going to publish it, like 2,000 copies if you want it. We're going to pay you some fee. So I think he paid me advance of 2,000 euros. So that's how I made my first money from Jewish blood. So we started, I was already ready with the archives, and I needed to go to mass murder sites in Lithuania. We have 234 of them, and they're all in the forest. And they thought, I'm not only Homo Sovieticus Lituanus, I have a disease which is called geographical idiotism. I get lost in every forest. I enter the forest, 3 trees, I'm lost. And I don't know how to change a tire. So I thought, I have to find somebody, maybe a student, or some kind of guy that would go with me and help me to orientate myself, because I needed to go to mass murder sites, I needed to interview people, I needed to get out of the forest and change a tire if something happens. And then the most hated Jew in Lithuania showed up. That was Dr. Ephraim Zurov. Everybody hates him, everybody, including myself. He's a monster. He's angry, ugly, aggressive. And then, if he talks about Lithuania, so it means it's the worst country in the world. All Lithuanians were degenerates. They were killing Jews even before Nazis came, and Lithuania should be swept out of the face of earth. That's that kind of person. And I thought, how interesting. Maybe he would go with me. I am descendant of the perpetrators, and he's descendant of the victims because his relatives were killed in Vilnius. And we'd make a journey with the enemy. And he agreed. He agreed. A big man, he would be very helpful if we get stuck with a car. And he agreed to share the cost of gas. What can be better? So we started this journey, 40 days. Of course, then there's Shabbat and this and that, and then you cannot go, all that is super religious. And then we visited 40 places. At every place, some of them we didn't find. It's impossible to find because they're just real bush. By every place, we would go into the closest house where somebody is living and would ask, do you know what happened here in 41? Sometimes people say, oh, I just moved in, but there is this and that house that, you know, they have seen it. We find so many people who have seen the atrocities themselves. You know, if you ask a genocide center why people, witnesses of the Holocaust, are not being interviewed, because almost 80 years, they're all dead. No, perpetrators are dead. Because in order to be a perpetrator, you needed to be 18 years old in 1941. But in order to realize what's happening, in order to see, maybe you're 6, you're 7, you're 9. They saw, they remember. And so we had from every place we visited, witnesses were there. Of course, we couldn't film them. I couldn't record them because, you know, they would be too afraid. It's not time when you're 80 to start telling that you never told in public to anyone. It's not time to be a hero. So the book came out, and something absolutely unexpected happened because I thought nobody gonna read it. My children wouldn't read it. My friends wouldn't read it. No, the publisher knows nobody would read it because who is interested in the Holocaust? And then the book became a scandal the same day when it was published because of the word "our people," I think, and because of Zurov and because I don't know what. Our people, you know, for Lithuanians, Jews are not our people because they are Jews. And killers are not our people because they're killers. And we put on the cover of the book, we found 2 pictures, which is, yeah, okay. So it's difficult to see here anyway. So there are 2 persons who look like brothers. They're exactly like brothers. In the Lithuanian version, you would see it better. One is Lithuanian champion, Lithuanian Jew, who represents Lithuanian 2 Olympic Games in 24 in Paris and 28 in Amsterdam. Itzhak Anolik. He was good enough to represent independent Lithuania, not good enough to live. So he was murdered in the pit. Another one who looks like his brother. He was commander of murder battalion who killed 70,000 Jews. They look like brothers. If you ask anybody, which one is a Jew? Lithuanians wouldn't be able to tell. They're our people, both murderers and those who were murdered, our people. So the scandal was there, and political elite reacted that the book is distorting Lithuanian history, serving Russian propaganda. And this guy who invited me to maybe I would be selected to Israel. Of course, I wasn't selected to Israel to go to this nice country. We were talking on TV program, and he said, this is not the book. This is not a book. It is a project coordinated from outside. Because exactly the same time, or more or less the same time, some kind of book of Holocaust appeared in Poland. You see, it's not so simple. And he came to me, he said, Rūta, you can say anything you want. You do it as Putin's project. What can I say? You know, like these kind of gossips are like smoke. The more you wave, the bigger spread of the smoke. The State Security Department announced that this book is a threat to national security. Then I thought, I have some friends in the police. I said, what does it mean? What does it mean in practice? It means that they're gonna bug your phone, and you have to be super careful not to have a glass of champagne and drive or something, because you might get into provocation. Nothing else. Still, the book became a national bestseller, 19,000 copies sold. And I started getting money. But I lost my friends. I don't know which is more important. A lot of friends just wouldn't talk to me anymore. They would ask, why are you feeding Putin's propaganda machine? Are Jews paying you? Why are you writing about their tragedy, not about our tragedy? And then I wrote this book about men. It was 15,000 copies. And I wrote my autobiography. It was, again, they published immediately 15,000 copies. So I was kind of okay. I lost some friends. Some people on the street would say, you are Putin's whore, you are Jewish whore, whatever. But they were still bearable. It was still okay. And then I ruined my life. One day, I decided to investigate the most famous Lithuanian partisan, 20 volumes in special archives. The most admired Lithuanian hero, leader of our post-war resistance against the Soviets. I was reading and reading and reading, and I found some controversial things that nobody knew about. I thought maybe I should write a book about this. Destroy one more myth, one more national myth. The God saved me from this. I found these controversial things, and I told about them in a radio interview. And another interview the same day, and another interview, and another interview. Why they are so interested? I mean, nice, fine, everything is fine. My new book, my autobiography came out, and they all want me on TV. I went to bed happy that night. I woke up that night being hated by everyone. Social media was full of attacks that now Vanagaitė proved that she's Putin's agent. She was defaming our national hero because Putin paid her for this. Internet was full of attacks. And by that day, 27th of October 2017, all of my books were removed from all bookstores. People were coming, when people called me, said, I went to the bookstore, I saw your book, I wanted to buy. And I went to the cashier said, I cannot sell this book. He said, okay, then I'm taking it with me. He said, not now, I call security. It was a very difficult blow. 27,000 books, 6 different titles, were removed from the shelves. And the publisher announced they're going to turn them into toilet paper. All will be recycled and turned into toilet paper. Another blow to follow the same day, the first president of Lithuania published an op-ed in the most popular portal with a clear message. This writer should go to the forest, find a tree, and condemn herself. I became Judas. There were many people in that, one way or another, agreed to this appeal. I got attacked by actually 2 people on the street, but one of them was too drunk, another was too old, so I managed to escape. From this who was too drunk, I had to escape to the closest building, which is a mental hospital. So I thought, okay, that's the right place for me then. The public prosecutor was considering starting against me a criminal case for defaming this person. At that moment, my children told me, Mom, make a public apology to avoid the jail. So it helped, and the case was dropped. I got a lawyer. It was not easy, because all the lawyers I approached, because I wanted to get my books back, all the lawyers say we do not get involved in politics. I claimed my books back. I got a big truck of books, can you imagine, 27,000, and put them in a friend's garage and left the country. What did I do wrong? I just was stupid. I forgot that I'm not living in UK, France, or Finland. I tested the limit of public tolerance with the book Our People. I hit my nation by telling too many of us Lithuanians were killing the Jews. We better admit it. The country survived somehow. And I hit my nation again, telling, you know what? We don't have heroes. So what do we have? What we are left with? And the country hit back. And rightly so. You shouldn't forget where you're living. I live in the country that is deeply traumatized by its 50 years of Soviet occupation and doesn't have a long tradition of democracy and free speech. I was naive to think that some bookstores or some publishers would run after my forbidden books. I would start selling them. No one would take them. No one. Too risky. I asked one bookstore, I said, why? What can happen to you if you put my book on the shelf? He said, maybe fire department will come and check how my bookstore is well with the fire. Maybe tax officer will come. I don't know. Better not to risk and understand them. So I ran away to Israel, where everyone loved me, of course. If you stay long enough with the people that love you, you slowly stop pitying yourself, slowly regain your self-confidence, and you start thinking, what's next? Do I have another choice in life that just disappear? I'm not that young. I cannot wait 30 years before I can write again or come back to my country. And there is another choice. Don't give up, Rūta. I have to continue what I have to do. Not a book about the partisans. That would be suicidal. I want to write another stronger book about the Holocaust, the ultimate book. I met by accident the most renowned historian of the Holocaust in Lithuania, the German historian, not Jewish, Christoph Dickmann, who is member of this Presidential Commission of Investigating Soviet and Nazi Crimes. And he wrote in German a most important book on the Holocaust in 21st century. It's a book, 1,200 pages, about German occupation policy in Lithuania. And unlike many Holocaust historians in the world he can explore the Holocaust from very different perspectives because he reads English, German, Hebrew, Yiddish, Russian, and Lithuanian. And I asked him, shall we write a book together? I'm going to ask you questions, simple questions. You're going to give me answers. And he said, yes. I won't go to this, Lithuania tried to persuade him not to get involved with this Putin's agent, but by the end, we worked with him for 2 years. And the book is wonderful. And now we wrote it in English. There's my very simple questions, and his quite elaborated answers, but this book is for everyone. Anybody who has a little bit of brains would understand what it's all about. I'm very proud of this book. Even my contribution is very little. I just persuaded him to do this book. And I think this book, such book about the Holocaust, should be written in every country, because people don't read books by historians. They need a journalist who would say, excuse me, I didn't get it. Can you explain it? I'm not afraid to look stupid to him. I'm representing people who are as stupid as I am, and I have questions, and he has to explain to me. So this Christoph Dickmann should be found in every country, and some journalists should do the job. So the book, I wrote to many publishers in Lithuania. I knew what was going to be the answer. So nobody answered me. I got one answer from one small publisher. The email sounded like, good morning, not interested. Okay, at least the answer. So we started a crowdfunding campaign. I started. I decided that I'm not taking a penny from for this work, but Christoph Dickmann is not Lithuanian. He doesn't have this mission and crazy thing of doing some mission or something. So I have to raise, his proper fee for him, which I did. And we self-published it. And we presented it in Lithuania in last summer. And it was met. There was no scandal. There were not many comments, practically with silence, which is a very wise thing to do. Because I think now our political elite realized that the louder the more you attack the book, the more people are interested. So if you stay, it's okay. It's a book. What kind of book? So the book is published. It's a wonderful book. And one day, in 30 years, it's going to be a book, the ultimate textbook on Holocaust of Lithuanian schools and universities, a major source of information and reflection about the Holocaust. And then I hope will be 20 lessons on the subject, not just one. I want to end with a very funny, just one sentence, 2 sentences. 2 years we were working with Christoph on Skype in Jerusalem, in Frankfurt. We finished our work in Jerusalem. We had a glass of wine facing the old city of Jerusalem. Then I went to the Western Wall and squeezed into it a little note to God with a very selfish request. I want to see the new book on the bookshelves in Lithuania. It worked. Apparently, Jewish God, Hashem as they call him, has checked his inbox. My books are back in some bookstores. I'm still not invited to speak like here. I'm still not invited to TV or anything. But 2 days ago, I got a contract with another publisher for another book which is going to deal with some other painful moments of the history of my country. So I haven't given up, and all is good. Thank you very much for attention. I'm ready for questions, comments, criticism, and whatnot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rūta. This was brilliant. What struck me is that, I'll ask the first question maybe, and then we'll open the floor for more. What struck me was that you said that your mistake or your misfortune was that you wrote this book not in Western Europe, but in Lithuania.
No, that I lived not in Western Europe.
Yes,
that was my mistake.
Yes, exactly. But this reminded me of let's say, Robert Gildia's book called Marianne in Chains, where he writes about the sort of ordinary French under Nazi occupation in France. And the conclusion was that they were doing pretty well, and they were collaborating, and they even had some sort of ambivalent attitude towards la résistance. And this book in France, which has much longer traditions of free speech, of democracy, even there, this book caused quite a massive scandal from different corners. And then I was just wondering, could you maybe tell us something about this ordinary Lithuanian, the one who was watching Jews being rounded up and led to the pits, this sort of indifferent bystander? What were their sort of, how did they come to terms with this, what was happening? Because, you know, in some towns, for instance, there was not a single German, right, as you
No.
said. They were just their neighbors, basically, taking their other neighbors and leading them to the pits. So all it would have taken was, you know, just a little...
My answer is simple, that the word condemned. If I am told by my city mayor, by chief of police, by this and that, go and do this. So it's easier to say yes and do this than disobey. It's always easier to say yes. And if people, you know, like as you know, three reactions to the stress. It's fight, flight, or freeze. Many people just froze, including those who were killing the Jews. It's automatic reaction. They tell in many testimonies, say, I became like a robot. So it's like freezing, it's not fighting. It's difficult to fight because you are fighting, you know, people who are already in the pit. You cannot flee because you will be a coward and you don't know, maybe there will be some consequences and you won't get your salary, you won't get this. So you freeze and you do what you're told to do. That's the only explanation. And also it's very interesting that they say there are two types of people. There are like three types of people during the Holocaust or behavior: perpetrators, bystanders, and righteous among the nations, the saviors. What about this person who took a little Jewish thing? Who is he? Is he part of the Holocaust picture or not? Those who were digging a pit, knowing to whom. I mean, they are gainers, they're messengers, they're different types of people. And some people, maybe you dug a pit and maybe you saved a Jew later. So it's like everything is not black and white. They say that even Goebbels saved a couple of Jews because they were his friends. So he is a savior, he should be awarded. This book is about that history is not black and white. It's a very gray area. and we have to face it. But it's hard.
Do you know how many people were saving the Jews? What's the percentage or numbers, or they're risking it?
There's the Yad Vashem admitted 894 Lithuanians they were saving the Jews, because this is documented. Lithuania said that there are 3,000 because they were there. If somebody said, I saved the Jew, so Lithuania would say, oh, he saved the Jew, so let's put him on the list. The Yad Vashem demanded 3 times less because he demands proof and testimonies that that person was saving the Jews. But what is very interesting, that if somebody would save the Jew for money, the Germans would give him 3 months of forced labor. If he would say, I saved the Jew because I was pitying him, it means ideological reason, then he could be shot. And many Lithuanians were getting some money from the Jews because they were, hiding them. So are they saviors? Are they gainers? You see how difficult it is to, and like, for example, if I would think about myself, would I be able to save a Jew in that time? Having 2 children? Most people who saved the Jews, they saved either very spontaneous, it was somebody crawled out of the pit to their house and you just cannot do, you just have to help that person. And then you start thinking. Or when Jews were in the ghettos, it was really well organized with sometimes some money involved, but who can blame them?
Okay. Let's have some questions. Brendan.
Thank you very much. Very interesting lecture. Can you tell us a little bit more about the structure of the Holocaust in Lithuania? Because it sounds as if it was a bit different from, let's say, Ukraine or Latvia, where obviously there was extensive collaboration by local population, but most of the murders were executed by the Einsatzgruppen. So is that not the case in Lithuania then?
No.
And if so, what were the Einsatzgruppen doing in Lithuania, or were they? I'm genuinely unsure.
No, they had Lithuanian battalions.
Yeah.
So Germans Einsatzgruppen organized Lithuanian self-defense battalions and sent them. They were under their command. Sometimes the commander would be German, but very often they wouldn't be a German commander. So actually there was Lithuanian government who were hoping if they would collaborate with Germans would give us independence or some kind of satellite kind of independence, where Germany never promised. So then that's why the Lithuanian government kept all the municipalities or mayors and policemen in place, and everybody was obeying German orders, even with Germans not present in that particular city. And then all municipality workers, all the tarnautojų savivaldybių, civil servants, they stay in place and they did what they were told to do. So it's about servility. It's about willing to obey those who they thought they come for forever. And only after Stalingrad, people started, already thinking maybe we should start some resistance because Germans are losing. Before that, Hitler was going, to Europe, and nobody would think that we would collapse.
Do we know what proportion of Lithuanian Jews were murdered by German institutions, either army or SS, and what proportion?
I don't think so. I know that German, in the very first days of war, there were Germans murdering some Jews, but later what was done in Lithuanian hands. And sometimes even pogroms were done by Lithuanians with German photography, because it was very important for their propaganda to see that Lithuania cannot stand with its Jews, and they're doing themselves. And sometimes Germans would say Lithuanians were too cruel. Unfortunately, but it's both servility, it was our incredible love for our own country, because Jews were bad for Lithuania, so that's why they had to go. Thank you.
I very much enjoyed your talk. So before the war, there was very strong tension between the Lithuanian population, the Jewish population then, I imagine, because no.
That wasn't. There wasn't. I mean, the Jews were living in Lithuania for 600 years. They were like, there was of course anti-Semitism, okay? You know, I go to the shop and, you know, I am a farmer. I don't have money. A Jew gives me, you know, for gifts and I bring money later. But, well, you know, why he has the money and not me? It's my land. And the church was quite anti-Semitic because, you know, you murdered Jesus and this was always there. But there was no pogroms, no open hostility. I think the relationships were quite good. But then 1940 happened. When Soviet occupation came, Soviets came and Lithuania didn't resist at all. And then Soviets started deporting and deporting and deporting. In the June 1941, 41, sorry, the massive deportation started. And then our national trauma that we accepted Soviets without any resistance, they must be the Jews. The Jews. And our own shame and our own guilt when Germans came, hit the Jews because Jews are Bolsheviks. Everybody in my, you know, among my friends would say, okay, Jews are communists. There were no Lithuanian communists in Lithuania. No. 10% of Lithuanian communists in 1941 were Jews. The rest were Lithuanians and some Russians. But we don't know. It's too traumatic. We need a scapegoat. And it's always a Jew.
Naman.
I have two questions actually. One is technical and one is historic. You mentioned the Germans used Lithuanian battalions in Belarus. If you could talk about why didn't they just use Belarusians entirely, or did they use that? Or was it something special to Lithuanians? And on the technical one, how difficult is it to do archival research in Lithuania? Do you ever experience any resistance from archivists?
Okay. You know, in Belarus, it's like actually Germans use this thing. Like, for example, you gather one battalion which is already, you know, skillful by murdering Jews in Lithuania, and then they tell them, you go fight in Belarus Soviet partisans. They go there, they are brought to some kind of village, and they have to surround that village full of Soviet partisans, children and whatnot. It's just logistically easier, and then sometimes Estonians would come to Lithuania. It's like, you know, it was so much, you would see from these books, there's so much chaos and so much things that, you know, it was not like Germans are planning and doing it perfectly well. No, for example, the Germans brought 5,000 Jews from Western Europe to Kaunas and marched them straight to the pits, telling them that you are going to South America and you need vaccination. So 5,000 people rolled up the sleeves and went to the pits. This 5,000 people are not in German statistics because it happened by accident. Because like at that point they were not supposed to murder Western Jews. They were supposed to work, and they made a mistake. 5,000. Okay, so it's a lot of messy things. Not all of them can be explained, you know, but.
And the second part.
The second.
Archivists.
I mean, we have all archives are open in Lithuania, except one thing that, you know, we have these cases, not only the murderers of the Jews, but other people who betrayed Soviet Union, about 80,000 cases. You come to the archive, you cannot show me everything what it is. You have to know the name of the perpetrator, you have to know his birth date, and you have to know his city he was born. So that's why my historians helped me say this and this and this and this. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known. But if you want, for example, to see who was collaborating with KGB, these archives are closed. Agentūrные dела closed. In Belarus, you don't get into any archive. Nothing. I tried, no. All is closed.
Thank you so much for your talk. So I'm from Luxembourg, also a small state, and the story you're told is very, very similar to the one that has been unearthed the last few decades in Luxembourg. So you also had a state that to some extent collaborated with Nazi efforts to find Jews, and in the case of Luxembourg, to deport them. Same thing happened in Luxembourg as well. In the 80s, some very brave journalists sort of dug into that and tried to uncover what really happened, because there had been an official culture of silence basically around it, right? The entire Luxembourg state had resisted in that narrative basically. But in 2015, some young historians published a report commissioned by the government, which resulted in an official apology, and the government accepted its sort of guilt of the administration. So unlike in Lithuania, where there seems to be a culture of silence to this day, that's at some point stopped in my country. Would you say that that's because of the geopolitical situation, because of this feeling of threat, that this sort of constructed false memory is being maintained artificially, that all of Lithuania resisted?
Yeah, partly because of the cultural tradition. It's a long tradition of freedom of speech and democracy. Part is geopolitical, of course. Because, like, sometimes I say, if we wouldn't have a Putin as a neighbor, we would have to invent it. Because it's easier to manipulate people. If we would go and make a big demonstration in Lithuania, what you would be accused of?
I was very struck by the context, the fear of Putin, and I wondered whether the discrediting now of Putin's kind of Nazification narrative, you know, as a result of what's happening in Ukraine. I mean, do you think that will change things in Lithuania? Do you think?
What exactly would change things?
Well, in the sense that, I mean, this was the excuse that was used, you know, for the invasion of Ukraine. Ukraine is full of Nazis, so I mean, Putin really can't use that sort of excuse, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, he uses automatically. He says Ukrainians are all drug users and Nazis. Drug users, I mean, he can say anything. He can say anything. He's not thinking clearly anymore. He doesn't need to.
Will that change, do you think, or is there any signs that that will change things in Lithuania? You know, that the Lithuanians will be less...
No, I think the war in Ukraine radicalized Lithuania even more. Because now we know that he's going to attack us next, and now we have to be strong and nationalistic and get our weapons. So it's not the time when they would say, "Oh, Rūta, you are okay." No.
It's more, there's a heightened sense of kind of national security threat.
Yes.
Yeah.
But some say that what Putin did in the last 3 months, he managed to silence anti-Semites. So at least there's somebody who people hate more than they hate the Jews. So it's good for the Jews.
Can you talk a bit about the Soviet education? I'm curious, why wouldn't the Soviets just say, you know, here's what we did, here's, you know, how much the Jews were suffering, we came and we tried to save them. Why wasn't that part of the...
Because there were no Jews, there was one Soviet nation. So a peace-loving Soviet citizen. And actually, even if you go now to Belarus, to mass murder site of the Jews near Minsk, which is, I think, 80,000 Jews were murdered. People. All science is for people. And then it was so interesting that, you know, we went there to that site, you know, modern, wonderful sculptures, everything tidy, beautiful. And we saw a group of children, like 10, 12 years old, passing by. And they asked him, you know, guys, do you know what's there? What's happening? He said, yeah, this is a monument for victims. What kind of victims? Jews? No, us, Belarusians. What kind of Belarusians? The Belarusian partisans were kept there. Why? Because, yes, they were kept there. Our history teacher told they were kept a long time, and they were fed beetroot. Why? Because they needed the blood to be red. They came from school. So it is like you go there, any monument in Belarus, peace-loving Soviet citizen. There were no nations, no Jews, no Lithuanians, nothing, all one. So that's the education we have got.
I'll ask maybe one more. You've mentioned that sometimes even Nazi Germans were sort of scolding Lithuanians for being too cruel with the Jews.
There was one or two cases like this, but I mean, because you see, Germans, they were worse than Lithuanians, I think. They wanted to do the dirty job with the hands of Lithuanians. They didn't want to shoot themselves. They want to organize. Sometimes some of the 2 or 3 sadists would do it, but they would organize. Sometimes they wouldn't be present. If there's somebody who does the job, so what's the problem? I want to end with one. Somebody asked me that what is the most horrifying image or sentence or fact from the Holocaust that haunts you? And I'm going to tell you, then we need a drink. When we went around Lithuania asking witnesses about what did they see, how the shootings were happening and whatnot, and they were saying, after we went to see the pits after a week or 2 weeks or a couple of days after the shooting, and the earth was moving. I thought, you can imagine things afterward or whatnot. When we were working on this book, I asked Christoph, you think it's post-war like myth or something? He said, no. I said, what do you mean no? He said, gases. No more questions. So that's why it's very difficult to accept Holocaust for us as a nation. It's too horrible.
The very last question, is there hope? Do you think that with the new generation of Lithuanians and the younger generation, they are not going to be that sort of one-dimensional?
I think there is hope. The problem is that there is still lack of education, as I told you. And they are young people of my children or younger, they are educated by old ladies who are educated by their grandmas with all the things. So I think the biggest problem is those people who move out of Lithuania and live abroad, and they become very open-minded, very aware of things, they are not coming back. That's the only problem I see. And those who stay, they might not get enough education and enough interest and enough awareness to accept this. So the gap is very big between those who are living in Lithuania, many of it, and those who live abroad. And sometimes, like my children live abroad now, they come back and sometimes they don't have anything to talk about with their friends, because it's still a province. And our media doesn't talk about the world events. We don't read Time. We read about crimes and things like in Lithuania. So we stay provincial. And if you are provincial, you will not accept the Western view on the Holocaust and other controversial issues. Very hard. But there is hope. Now if I go to Jewish graves and go to mass murder sites, everywhere I see sometimes a flower, sometimes a candle. It means that people just start caring. The only good thing that I did with my books about the Holocaust, an important subject became somewhat important. It's there. Some people say books are horrible. Some people say that really happened. But it is the public awareness is much stronger now. So I did something good. Thank you.
On that note, thank you very much,
Thank
Rūta.
you.
It was such a fascinating lecture and discussion. Both Rūta's books are available on Amazon, actually. I bought them on Amazon, but can you buy them?
No, I just have one copy. This book has become very expensive. This book was like $20 when it came out 2 years ago. This is $35. Horrible.
I think it's not that bad on Amazon. It's like 20.
Yeah, is it? I don't know. I bought it for 35. Yeah. I said, it's not worth it.
They have stellar reviews on Amazon, yeah. Would you like to disclose what's your next book about?
Yes. We have a prison, the only prison in Lithuania, which was built in Vilnius. In Lithuania, but it is in Vilnius, and it was closed now. It was built in Tsar times and was closed 2 years ago. The whole history of Lithuania is there, like a microcosm. From Tsar times to Polish times, German times, Russian times, Lithuanian times. Wow. But this is also, there will be controversial things. I cannot write about men anymore. They're not controversial enough. It will come this year. It will come out this year.
Thank you very much, Rūta. Big round of applause for our
Thank you.
excellent speaker.
Thank you. Thank you.